The restaurant was not fancy. It sat on a quiet street, a place most people pass without noticing. Inside, the lights were warm, the tables were clean, and the air carried the soft smell of food and coffee. It was the kind of place people came to after a long day, not to impress anyone, but to feel comfortable. That evening, a man walked in who clearly did not belong to this world. His suit was simple but perfect, the kind that cost more than most people earned in months. He moved with calm confidence, not rushing, not looking around in wonder. He had been to far more expensive places than this. Still, he chose this restaurant on purpose. He was a billionaire, though no one there knew it. He did not like attention. He often traveled alone and avoided places where people recognized him. He enjoyed observing others, especially those who lived far from his world of private jets and glass offices. To him, small places like this felt more real. He took a seat near the window and placed his phone face down on the table. He did not open the menu right away. Instead, he watched a young waitress move between tables, carrying plates and refilling glasses. Her clothes were simple. Her hair was tied back neatly. She did not rush, but she did not waste time either. When customers spoke, she listened fully. When she answered, her voice was calm and polite. She did not force a smile, but when she smiled, it felt real. The man noticed how she handled a difficult customer at the next table. The customer complained about the food, though it was clear he had eaten most of it. The waitress did not argue. She apologized once, clearly, and offered a solution. Her tone stayed steady. The situation ended without noise or drama. That caught the man's attention. People often acted differently when they thought someone had power. He had seen fear, fake kindness, and greed too many times. But here, the waitress treated everyone the same. Rich or poor, kind or rude, she stayed grounded. After a few minutes, she came to his table. "Good evening," she said. "May I take your order?" Her English was clear, without effort. She held a small notepad, but did not rush him. He finally picked up the menu, glanced at it, then looked back at her. For reasons he could not fully explain, curiosity pushed him forward. Over the years, he had developed a bad habit. He liked to test people. Not loudly, not cruelly, but quietly. A question here, a comment there. He told himself it was harmless. "I'll have the special," he said at first. She nodded and waited. Then, almost casually, he added something that changed the air between them. "Try Japanese," he said. He said it smoothly, without warning, as if it were nothing unusual. His tone carried quiet confidence, the kind that assumed the other person would not understand. At the nearby tables, a few people noticed. One man lifted his head slightly. A couple paused their conversation. It was clear what was expected. Confusion, embarrassment, maybe an awkward laugh. The waitress did not react right away. She looked at him for half a second, her eyes calm, thoughtful. Then she answered him in Japanese. Her voice stayed polite, clear, and natural, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. She even adjusted her tone slightly, the way native speakers do without thinking. The billionaire froze. His mind went blank for a moment. This was not what he expected. Not at all. He had spent time in Japan years ago. He knew the language well enough to recognize when someone was pretending. This was not memorized phrases or broken sentences. This was fluent. Around them, the quiet restaurant seemed to pause. A few people stared openly now. Others pretended not to listen. But everyone felt the shift. The waitress finished her sentence and waited. "Would you like anything else?" she asked, switching back to English smoothly. He blinked once. "No," he said slowly. "That will be all." She nodded, wrote something on her notepad, and walked away without another word. No pride, no smug look, no sign that she had done anything special. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, staring at the table. He felt something he was not used to feeling. Uncertainty. For the first time in a long while, he realized how wrong his assumption had been. He had expected to feel clever. Instead, he felt exposed. As he waited for his food, he watched her again. She moved the same way she had before. She did not look at him differently. She did not glance back to see his reaction. To her, the moment was already over. That bothered him more than if she had smiled proudly. When his food arrived, he thanked her. She replied politely and left him alone. He took a bite, but barely tasted it. His thoughts drifted back to the early days of his own life, long before the money. He remembered being judged by his clothes, his accent, his lack of connections. He remembered how people spoke down to him, assuming they knew his limits. Somewhere along the way, he had become the kind of person who made those same assumptions. The restaurant slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Forks clinked. Low conversations resumed. Outside, cars passed by, unaware that something small but important had just happened inside. The billionaire sat there longer than he planned. He did not check his phone. He did not think about meetings or numbers or deals. His attention stayed on one simple question. Who was she? He noticed small details now. The way she spoke to an elderly woman, bending slightly so she could hear better. The way she joked softly with a child, making him laugh. The way she stayed patient, even when her feet must have been tired. This was not someone pretending to be kind. At one point, she paused near the counter and looked at a photo taped to the wall behind it. It showed a group of people standing in front of a building that looked like a school. Her expression changed just for a moment. It was not sadness exactly, more like distance, a memory. Then she straightened and went back to work. The billionaire finished his meal and placed his card on the table. But he did not stand up. He waited. When she returned, she picked up the card and thanked him again. He hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Your Japanese is very good," he said. "Not many people speak it that well." She gave a small smile. "Thank you." That was all. No explanation. No story. She walked away, leaving him with more questions than answers. As he finally stood to leave, he felt something shift inside him. This was not just surprise. It was a sense that he had crossed paths with someone whose story he did not understand yet, but needed to. Outside, the night air felt cooler. The street was quiet. He paused for a moment before getting into his car and looked back at the restaurant window. Inside, the waitress was clearing a table, focused, steady, unaware that her simple answer had just unsettled a man who owned more than he could count. And without realizing it, both their lives had just moved one step closer to a change that neither of them could yet see. The next day, the restaurant felt the same on the surface. The same warm lights. The same quiet street outside. The same smell of food drifting through the air. But for the billionaire, nothing felt ordinary anymore. He returned just after sunset. This time, he did not come by accident or curiosity. He came with intention. He chose a table farther inside, where he could see most of the room without being obvious. Again, he placed his phone face down. Again, he waited. The waitress was there. She moved with the same steady rhythm as before, greeting customers, balancing plates, answering questions. If she recognized him, she did not show it. No raised eyebrow. No extra attention. To her, he was just another customer. That alone impressed him. He ordered something simple. No tests this time. No games. He spoke plainly, and she responded politely, just as she did with everyone else. As she walked away, he noticed something he had missed before, a faint tiredness in her eyes. Not weakness, but the kind that comes from long days and heavy responsibility. It was the look of someone who carried more than they showed. He watched quietly. A group of young people laughed loudly at one table. An older couple shared a plate, speaking softly. A delivery driver rushed in and out. Through it all, she stayed calm, adapting to each person without losing herself. The billionaire thought about how many people he had met who spoke many languages, held degrees, and wore confidence like armor. Yet they often lacked this kind of balance, this quiet strength. When she returned with his food, he thanked her. "You came back," she said, more as an observation than a question. "Yes," he replied. "I enjoyed the food yesterday." She nodded and left him to eat. Halfway through his meal, something unexpected happened. At a nearby table, a man began speaking loudly on his phone, complaining about work. His voice cut through the room, making others uncomfortable. The waitress approached him gently and asked if he could lower his voice. The man snapped back, saying he was a paying customer. The room tensed. The waitress did not raise her voice. She did not threaten. She simply listened, nodded once, and offered him a quieter seat near the back if he needed to continue his call. Her tone was respectful, firm, and calm. After a moment, the man agreed. The tension dissolved. The billionaire felt a strange sense of admiration. Leadership, he thought, did not always come from authority. Sometimes it came from understanding people. Later, as he finished eating, he noticed her pause again near the counter. She checked her phone quickly, her expression tightening just a little. She slipped it back into her pocket and returned to work, but something had shifted. Her movements were still smooth, yet her smile did not reach her eyes. When she came to collect his plate, he spoke carefully. "Long day?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "They usually are." He could tell she did not want sympathy, so he did not push. Instead, he said, "You handle things well here." She looked surprised, just slightly. "Thank you." Again, no explanation, no opening. The billionaire paid and stood up, but instead of leaving, he waited near the door. He told himself he was just thinking. In truth, he was unsure how to move forward. For a man used to control, this uncertainty felt unfamiliar. After a few minutes, she stepped outside to take a short break. The cool air hit her face, and she closed her eyes for a brief moment. He cleared his throat gently so as not to startle her. "I hope I'm not bothering you," he said. "I just wanted to say something." She turned, cautious but polite. "You speak Japanese very well," he continued. "I lived there once. It's not easy." Her guard rose slightly. "I know." There was a pause. "I didn't mean to put you on the spot yesterday," he said. "That was careless of me." This time, she looked directly at him. Really looked. "It's fine," she said after a moment. "It happens." Something in her voice told him this was not the first time someone had underestimated her. "If you don't mind me asking," he said slowly, "how did you learn it?" She considered the question. For a second, it seemed like she might brush it off. Then she sighed quietly. "I studied abroad," she said, "a long time ago." That was all she offered. He nodded, respecting the boundary. That must have been difficult. She gave a small, tired smile. It was worth it, at the time. The silence between them felt heavy, but not uncomfortable. "I should get back," she said finally. "Of course," he replied. As she turned to go inside, he felt a pull he couldn't ignore. "Sometimes," he said, "life takes strange turns." She stopped, glanced back, and nodded once. "Yes, it does." That was the end of it. She returned to the restaurant. He walked to his car. But neither of them felt the conversation was finished. That night, the billionaire sat alone in his hotel room, staring out at the city lights. He thought about all the people he had passed by in life without seeing them, how easily he had fallen into that habit again. He realized something uncomfortable. He wanted to know her story, not out of curiosity, not out of power, out of respect. And somewhere across the city, the waitress finished her shift, changed into a simple jacket, and stepped into the night. As she walked toward the bus stop, she thought about the man from the restaurant, not because he was rich. She did not know that, but because, for the first time in a long while, someone had apologized for underestimating her, and that stayed with her longer than she expected. The days passed, but the billionaire could not stop thinking about the waitress. He returned to the restaurant almost every evening, always careful to appear casual, always careful not to disturb her. Each time, he watched how she moved, how she spoke, how she treated the customers. There was something about her calmness, her confidence, and her quiet intelligence that drew him in. He could feel a story behind her eyes, a life that was bigger than this small restaurant. One evening, he arrived a little earlier than usual. The sun was just beginning to set, and the street was quiet. Inside, the restaurant was preparing for the dinner rush. The waitress greeted him with the same polite nod she gave every customer. But this time, he noticed a faint tension in her shoulders. He wondered what kind of day she had endured before he arrived. He ordered his meal as usual, but he did not rush. He wanted to see more of her, to observe the subtle details of her behavior. As she moved around the restaurant, he noticed something that surprised him. She interacted with every customer with genuine care. A father struggled to calm a crying child. and she gently offered small distractions. A couple argued softly over a menu choice, and she helped them with patience, her voice never sharp. Every action was deliberate, yet effortless. When she returned to his table with his food, he spoke carefully. "You have an unusual way of handling people. Have you always been like this?" She paused for a moment, then smiled faintly. "I had to learn," she said simply. That answer made him even more curious. There was no arrogance in her words, but there was weight, experience, a history that had shaped her. He watched her as she cleared a nearby table. He noticed the careful way she organized the dishes, as if each plate mattered more than just its food. He realized she treated people, not just tables, with that same thoughtfulness. Later, when she came to refill his water, he ventured gently, "May I ask about your past? How you learned Japanese?" Her hands paused over a glass pitcher. She looked at him, her eyes holding something unsaid. Then she nodded slightly. "I studied abroad, many years ago." He wanted to press further, but he held back. Instead, he listened quietly as she continued, almost to herself. "It was a difficult time. I had little money, and I had to work many jobs just to stay. But I learned quickly. I had to. There was no other choice." He felt a pang of respect. This was not a story of privilege. This was a story of survival, resilience, and determination. "Did you enjoy it?" he asked softly, careful not to seem intrusive. She looked down at the table for a moment. "Some days were hard, almost unbearable, but I learned more than I ever expected. About life, about myself, about people." Her honesty caught him off guard. He was used to people carefully hiding their struggles, or framing them in a way that seemed easier to digest. But here, she spoke plainly, without embellishment or complaint. He felt a rare clarity in her words. After a pause, he asked, "What made you come back here, to this work?" She smiled faintly. "Life doesn't always follow the plan. I had opportunities, yes, but sometimes circumstances force you to change direction. I chose stability for a while, to rebuild, to live simply." He listened intently. He understood that life could be unpredictable, that even the smartest people sometimes had to start over. But the courage to do so quietly, without complaining, was rare. He noticed her glance at a small notebook she kept in her apron pocket. She scribbled occasionally, mostly notes, sometimes sketches. He realized she maintained her mind, kept her skills alive, even while working long shifts. That explained part of her fluency, her quick thinking, and her adaptability. He asked gently, "Do you plan to go back to your original path someday?" She considered the question, then said, "Perhaps, but I'm learning to value what I have now. Each day teaches something new." He nodded, absorbing her words. There was wisdom in her humility, strength in her patience, and yet a quiet ambition still glimmered beneath the surface. She was someone who had faced challenges and learned from them, but who had not allowed bitterness or regret to shape her. As he left that evening, he realized he was no longer observing casually. He was drawn into her life, compelled to understand her story. He felt a mix of admiration and curiosity, but also a strange responsibility, not to intervene, not to offer charity, but to acknowledge her strength in some small way. Outside, the city lights reflected on the wet pavement from a recent rain. He walked slowly, thinking about the lessons she had taught him without speaking directly. He thought about how often people were judged superficially, by appearance or circumstance, and how rarely someone displayed true capability without announcing it. Somewhere inside him, he knew that this encounter was changing him. His judgments, once quick and dismissive, now fell heavy. He wondered how many people he had overlooked in his life, assuming he understood them at a glance. Across the city, the waitress ended her shift. She packed her notebook carefully into her bag, pulled on her jacket, and stepped out into the evening air. Her steps were measured, deliberate. She had learned to navigate the world with care, balancing strength and humility. She had faced hardships that left marks, but she had carried them gracefully. As she walked to catch the bus, she thought about the man from the restaurant, not because he was rich. She did not know that. Not because he was impressive in the usual sense, but because he had paused, noticed her, and for a moment treated her as a human being with depth, not as someone defined by her job or appearance. That acknowledgement mattered more than any praise or reward. And somewhere in a quiet hotel room across the city, the billionaire stared at the ceiling, thinking of her. He realized he wanted to understand people better, to see beyond the surface. And he recognized that meeting her was more than a chance encounter. It was a lesson he did not know he needed. The billionaire returned again, not out of curiosity this time, but out of a quiet desire to see her. He parked a few blocks away to avoid drawing attention, knowing he could sit inside without anyone realizing he'd been there so often. He chose a table near the middle, giving him a clear view of her movements without staring too directly. The restaurant was busier than usual. Evening traffic of people coming home, some eating friends, some having casual dinners. He observed her weaving through tables, moving gracefully but with focus. Her calmness stood out against the rush around her. She smiled briefly at a child spilling juice, gently helped an elderly man balance his tray, and spoke softly to a couple arguing about their order. He noticed how she maintained her composure, even when things got hectic. A regular customer came in late and complained about a small mistake in his meal. She did not flinch. She listened, nodded, and offered a solution that was both polite and efficient. There was no drama, no irritation, just quiet competence. He found himself admiring not just her skill, but her patience. When she came to his table, he felt a strange nervousness. He had never felt this way speaking to someone who seemed so ordinary on the surface, but extraordinary in reality. "Good evening," she said, her voice calm and warm. "Good evening," he replied, trying to match her tone. "I wanted to talk for a moment, if that's all right." She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. "Of course." He took a breath. "I've been coming here a few times recently, and I wanted to say I misjudged you before, and I want to apologize." She looked at him, not with surprise, but with a quiet curiosity. "You don't have to apologize," she said. "People often do." "I know," he said, "but I still should. I assumed you would not understand what I said yesterday. I assumed, wrongly, and it was careless." She nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "Thank you for saying that." He realized he was no longer speaking from a place of amusement or testing. He spoke honestly, reflecting on himself. "I've spent a long time judging people quickly, by their jobs, by how they look, by how they act in small moments. I've learned that's wrong. And meeting you has reminded me of that." There was a pause. She considered his words, but said nothing immediately. Then she spoke softly. "It's rare for people to notice that, to think about their own judgments. Most people just move on." He nodded. "I've moved on from many things, but this makes me reflect." She smiled faintly, a small warmth in her eyes. "Reflection is important," she said. He felt an unexpected connection. It was not romantic. Not yet anyway. It was a deep respect, a recognition of the life she had lived, the choices she had made, and the strength she carried quietly. He wondered how many people in the world had lives like hers, unnoticed and unappreciated. He leaned forward slightly. "I don't want to interfere in your life. I don't want to offer charity or advice you didn't ask for. I just want to say that I see you, and I respect what you do." Her eyes met his fully. "Thank you. That means more than you know." The restaurant grew noisier around them, but they remained in their own small space of understanding. He noticed how, even in his presence, she never changed herself to impress anyone. She stayed authentic, humble, and skilled. He thought back to the first time he had tested her with Japanese. He had intended to see her stumble, to feel clever. Instead, he had felt exposed and strangely enlightened. Over the past days, he realized he had learned more about humility and respect than he had from any business deal, any meeting, or any success. She glanced at a table with a young couple and a child. She moved to help them, and he watched the care in her hands, the way she knelt slightly to make eye contact with the child. It was natural, effortless, yet so human. He reflected that life lessons were often in these small moments, not in grand gestures. After a few minutes, she returned to his table. "Is there something else you wanted to say?" she asked, curiosity soft but present. "Yes," he said carefully. "I wanted to tell you that The way you handle yourself, the way you treat people, it's remarkable. You face challenges, and yet you don't let them harden you. That's something I think the world underestimates. Her lips curved slightly. I do what I can. Life is difficult enough without adding more bitterness. He nodded. He realized she spoke not only from experience, but from choice. She chose patience, kindness, and humility even when life had forced her to struggle. That was rare, and he felt a quiet admiration for her strength. I also wanted to say, he continued, that I hope this doesn't come across wrong, but I'd like to help you in some way. Not because you need it, but because I want to acknowledge your talent and resilience. She studied him for a long moment. Then she shook her head gently. I appreciate that, but I've learned to manage on my own. Help is only valuable if it doesn't take away your own strength. He smiled faintly. I understand. I wouldn't want to do anything that changes who you are. The silence between them was comfortable. He realized that sometimes respect was the most powerful gesture, and acknowledgement could be more meaningful than any financial support. He glanced around the restaurant, observing the people she had served and the way she moved. The contrast between her quiet life and the chaos of the outside world struck him. Here was someone living fully in her own truth, while he had spent so long chasing appearances and achievements. After finishing his meal, he stood, leaving a generous tip, but nothing more. He wanted to respect her space, to avoid creating any sense of obligation. She thanked him politely, and he watched as she continued her work with the same calm efficiency. Outside, the city lights glimmered on wet streets from a light drizzle. He walked slowly to his car, thinking about the lessons he had learned. Humility, respect, observation, the importance of seeing beyond the surface. He realized he'd been changed quietly by someone he had first approached with arrogance. Meanwhile, the waitress closed the restaurant for the night. She packed her things, checked her notebook, and stepped out into the evening. She paused for a moment, looking up at the sky, feeling the rain cool her face. Though tired, she felt a sense of quiet satisfaction in her day. She had helped people, done her work well, and maintained her dignity. And somewhere in the city, someone had noticed, not because of what she did for him, not because she served him a meal, but because he finally saw her as she was, a person with depth, resilience, and strength. That acknowledgement mattered more than any other recognition. And as she walked toward the bus stop, she felt a subtle shift in her understanding of people. Some could change, even quietly, when they took the time to notice. And somewhere, the billionaire carried a lesson that would stay with him for a long time. That true respect comes not from wealth, status, or power, but from seeing people for who they truly are. The following week, the billionaire returned once more. The streets were quieter in the early evening, and the restaurant had its familiar warmth. Inside, the waitress moved through the space with her usual calm, tending to each table as if every person mattered equally. He took a seat near the back, letting her pass by without drawing attention to himself. He watched her as she handled the dinner crowd. A family came in late, and their young child was upset. She knelt to the child's level, spoke softly, and made a small game out of arranging napkins, easing the child's mood. At another table, an older man struggled to read the menu. She brought him a magnifying glass on the counter and guided him through his choices with patience and clarity. Each action was ordinary in appearance, but extraordinary in its impact. When she approached him with his order, he finally spoke. "I hope you don't mind if I sit for a moment," he said. She looked at him, calm, polite. "Of course." He paused before speaking again, trying to find the right words. "I wanted to say something important. Over the past days, I've realized something. I've met many people in my life, some rich, some poor, some in powerful positions, some just passing through. But very few have shown me what I've seen in you." She tilted her head slightly, curious but cautious. "You have strength, humility, and patience that I've rarely witnessed. You face challenges, learn from them, and yet you remain kind and grounded. That is remarkable." She listened quietly, her expression thoughtful. "Thank you. That means a lot, even if you don't realize how much." He leaned forward. "I don't want to interfere with your life. I don't want to give charity or create pressure. But I do want to offer something that acknowledges your talent and resilience." Her eyes met his, steady calm. "I appreciate that," she said. "But I've managed on my own, Any assistants must respect my independence. He smiled faintly. Exactly. That's why I want to create a door, not a handout. Something that lets you explore possibilities, not change who you are. She was silent for a moment. Then she nodded once. I understand. That is thoughtful. They spoke quietly about possibilities, not details, not formal plans, but ideas that could help her skills and knowledge be recognized. He suggested introductions to mentors, letters of recommendation, and small opportunities that allowed her to pursue goals if she chose. She did not ask for it, but she accepted the chance, understanding that it was a gesture of respect, not charity. As the evening went on, he watched her continue her work. A new group of customers arrived. Chatting loudly, she handled them with her usual grace, her tone polite yet firm, guiding them without ever seeming to impose. He realized that her impact was not only in words, but in how she lived her life. That quiet strength touched everyone she encountered, often without them even noticing. When she returned to his table, she spoke softly. I'll do my best with what you've offered, if I can, but I need to do it my own way at my own pace. Exactly, he said. I wouldn't have it any other way. He left the restaurant later, walking slowly through the quiet streets. He reflected on the lessons he had learned over the past week. Humility, respect, observation, patience. The world had shown him that power was not about wealth or influence, but about the ability to see people clearly, to honor their lives without judgment. The waitress, meanwhile, finished her shift and packed her notebook carefully. She stepped outside, feeling the night air on her face. She had been offered an opportunity, yes, but more importantly, she had been seen and acknowledged for who she truly was. That recognition, quiet and sincere, felt more valuable than anything else. The next morning, she arrived at the restaurant early. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, not because of external reward, but because someone had recognized her worth. She thought about the lessons she had observed from him as well. How often people underestimated her, how often the world judged too quickly, and how powerful simple acknowledgement could be. Over time, small changes occurred. He occasionally sent letters of introduction to mentors and professional contacts who could guide her. She followed these carefully, learning, growing, and choosing what worked best for her. The billionaire never pressured her. He simply watched quietly from a distance, satisfied that it made a difference without altering her character or independence. One evening, months later, he returned to the restaurant. He observed her greeting customers with her usual warmth, helping a teenager struggling with homework who had come in with a parent, and calming a nervous couple visiting for a special occasion. She did not notice him immediately, but he smiled quietly as he watched her impact on the world around her. When she finally came to his table, she greeted him with the same calm politeness. But now, there was a subtle spark in her eyes, a quiet confidence, the kind that comes from being recognized, guided, and trusted. Good evening, she said. Good evening, he replied, smiling. It's good to see you. They spoke briefly, sharing small details of her growth and the lessons they both had learned. He left the restaurant later, feeling a sense of fulfillment he had never felt in any boardroom or business meeting. Not from money, not from deals, but from a knowledge that he had truly seen someone and had helped them without diminishing their independence. And the waitress, walking home that night, felt a quiet pride. She had been tested, recognized, and supported in a way that respected her strength. And in doing so, she had inspired someone else to see the world differently. Their encounter had been brief and ordinary in many ways, but the impact was lasting. Two lives, once parallel, had crossed paths in a moment of humanity, respect, and quiet transformation. The billionaire had learned humility and observation. The waitress had gained acknowledgement and opportunity. Both had been changed, not through grand gestures or wealth, but through understanding and respect. The city continued its rhythm, streets alive with lights and movement. But for these two, a subtle, lasting change had taken place. One had learned the value of seeing beyond surface appearances. The other had been recognized for the depth, skill, and quiet strength she had carried all along. And in that, they both found something rare and profound, a shared respect that would quietly shape the rest of their lives.